This is Dateline News and Conversation. The topic tonight is going to be economics of war and peace. Now, I've been kind of on fire for the last few days, maybe the last couple of weeks, because I think since January 1st, the world as we knew it has changed. Trump is unhinged. Not only did he didn't invade yet, but he threatened to invade Venezuela. He said he's going to govern Venezuela. He had the United States Special Forces, Delta Force, kidnap and abduct President Maduro and his wife and flew them off to the United States for bogus trial. He has subsequently said, I have my own morality. I don't have any need of international law. I will decide what to do. Now, this is just pure power. Forget about diplomacy. Forget about democracy. Forget about human rights. Forget about freedom. Forget about any of that bullshit. Because Trump has shown that he just doesn't care. So here's what else he's done. Now, maybe it's speculation, who knows? But I know many people here in Russia believe that the 91 drones that were flying to Putin's residence in Novgorod were designed as an assassination attempt on President Putin. Trump just recently approved the hijacking of a Russian tanker and another tanker carrying oil or gas, I don't know which, from Venezuela. He is saying he's going to take Greenland either by bribing the citizens of Greenland with like $100,000 apiece or a military invasion. He also has said that depending on how Iran, the government of Iran, reacts to the protest, he will assist Israel in attacking Iran. Now, I want to make something perfectly clear. There has been no change in United States foreign policy for over 100 years. And this is the basis of American foreign policy, and it's based on the research and the study of somebody that I knew. He's since passed away, William Blum. And these are the three pillars of American foreign policy. Number one is the spreading of American capitalism all over the world. This is evidently clear right now as we speak for anybody that's got their eyes open. Pillar number two, there is no alternative to capitalism. And so American foreign policy is to prevent any society that might serve as a successful example of an alternative to capitalism. For example, socialism in Venezuela, socialism throughout many of the countries of South America, socialism or communism, however you want to define it, in Russia and China, and any system that is not in line with American interest. The second pillar of American foreign policy is to not allow it. And the third pillar, we see this today clearer than ever. Expanding the empire politically, economically, and militarily. Expanding this hegemony over the entire globe and to prevent the rise of any regional power that might challenge American supremacy. Russia, China, India, Venezuela, North Korea, take your pick. The list is endless. Now, that leads me to the topic that we're going to talk about tonight. We've been talking about Alanna Hartsok's book, that the earth belongs to everyone. And one of the things that Alanna has been talking about is a change in the way we are taxed. What is taxed? Now, here's what Trump has just did that has just really caused my blood to boil. Not only have we been taxed through our entire lives, all of us who have worked for any number of years, they have taxed our labor. They've taxed whatever we've done. And then they've taxed everything we buy, whether it be a car or a house or a jacket or a coat. I'm not sure if they tax food, but they've basically been taxing everything. And now that I'm retired and I'm receiving Social Security, they even tax that. So they put tax upon a tax upon a tax. And this has got me really, it has been pissed off. Every time I do my tax returns, I'm seeing this, I got to pay this for an income tax. And now what Trump has just done, he has renamed Social Security to the Government Benefit Program. That's bullshit. This is not a government benefit program. This is our retirement program. It's not a benefit of the damn government. Yeah, maybe it was a great move, a socialistic move to allow all of us to save for our retirement, which we gladly did. I didn't object once when I paid into my Social Security each year, and my employer also paid part of that. To me, that was incredibly fair. But now Trump is, you see what happens with language and vocabulary? A government benefit program. Bullshit. Nobody can believe that, because now what they can do, they can just take it back. You don't have this benefit anymore. So this brings me to tonight's topic: the economics of war and peace, and fairness and justice, not just for American people, but for people all over the world. My guest tonight, she's returning, Alanna Hartsok from Pennsylvania. Alanna, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much. And Regis, there's a lot of boiling blood these days.
No kidding, but Alanna, I don't know where you're going to go to pick it up from where I just let you have it.
But, okay, trust me.
but the show now is all yours.
Okay. And I'm going to go through what we've been looking at with economics of war and peace, the charts I've been using as it relates to Venezuela, which is going to be our case study. I knew Bill Blum. We became friends at the end of his life as well. You mentioned Bill Blum. I reference much of his work. I draw from in my last article of my book, and that article is called Economics of War and Peace. So we could talk about how interesting I got to connect with Bill, but he's a very important geopolitical analyst, as we all know and appreciate. And he was had been right inside the government, I think the State Department. He had a great clarity. But what we're seeing with Trump is it's just a continuation. I mean, our active wars started back with Philippine with the Spanish American War.
Yep.
When the Philippine people thought, oh, they were being liberated from Spain, and then the U.S. became the dominator. And Mark Twain and the pacifists at that time were very much against that war. So the other thing is our full spectrum dominance policy. I do think that with language, we should be clear that this is it's the elites foreign policy. The people of this country have never been invited or engaged in any formulation, discussion, debate about U.S. foreign policy. The elites declared that that was their domain early on, and so the people got really sleepy. They didn't have any invitations or opportunities to really dive into U.S. foreign policy. So we have such a blatant example of what empires do. Roman Empire, then British Empire, you name it, consolidates force, power, strength, might into the hands of a few who've managed to acquire incomparable amounts of wealth. And that's what we got to look at. That's what we've been looking at. We've been calling this the fundamental crack in the Liberty Bell that has now totally disabled and disempowered any kind of real democracy. So Trump is just, he's the epitome of what we've been headed for in what's called the unitary presidency.
Yeah.
We've been giving more and more power to the president in the United States over the past, before Trump, this has been happening, the past few presidencies, more and more, because if you can control the kingpin, you can control the kingdom. So the elites control plan is you put the power in one person, but then you control that person because you have the handle on where wealth and power, how it's generated, and where it goes. So does
So
that make sense?
Alanna, let me jump in just for a second.
Yeah, I'm going to get my PowerPoint up.
Yeah, you know who it was? It was Dick Cheney during Bush II's administration that Cheney came up with this concept of the unitary executive and figured out how to worm his way around it to give the president what you're talking about, unlimited powers. All right, take it away. It's your show.
It really, we, yeah, he was pretty much the president at the time, wasn't he, Dick Cheney?
Yeah.
And often referred to as Darth Vader, which kind of shows the how the power has evolved when you look at who Cheney was. Now I'm trying to get this. Got to start the slideshow here. Okay, start from current slide. Can you see this?
Yeah, of course.
Economics of. Okay, well, this is what it's all about. This is a case study. Now, going quickly through these 4 important charts. This shows a dynamic equilibrium, balanced society, harmonic. People have access to the earth, the land and resources to use their labor to get their basic needs well met. And there are understandings and rules that make sure everybody has that right of access to Mother Earth. Once you have a few grab in some way from others, now you have a violent system coming in. And you had a recent interview with Eric Arnau, and Eric talked about this problem of the Western world. He said 500 years ago. Well, he's talking about colonialism, but we have our John Mohawk was a native elder and also a scholar at the University of Buffalo. And John Mohawk said the problem in the Western world began 500 years ago also. He wasn't talking about Christopher Columbus. He was talking about prior. He was talking about the enclosures when the barons got more and more power that they wanted to they kicked the people off the common land. And then the people were thrown into, died of starvation, poverty, thrown into the cities where how do we do something, make something so that the rich people will buy it? That was when the cash economy really started taking hold too. And then the only way you could get any land was you work hard enough for the rich so that you could buy back a little piece of land. So first gun. Well, as we see today, affordable housing issues and so on, you can have 2 people working and slaving. And you still don't have enough money outright to save to buy a house. So you have to borrow, right? So who has the money to borrow from? It was those who originally ripped you off the land to begin with, who then accumulated here. Now look at the privilege fund, means unearned income, private law. So those few accumulated excess funds, surplus value, however you want to look at it, they had something to spare to now loan out. So they start the banking system. And now you have a bankster system that charges interest and becomes odious debt as we get countries, Africa, around the world indebted by corrupt leaders. And now the people have to pay most of their labor. They're paying off the debt from their countries. as American people are now on to their children and children's children, expected to pay off the debt accumulated by their foremothers and fathers because of this exploitation. So, two guns: land, money. There are two ways to conquer and enslave a nation. One is by the sword, the other is by debt. Look how far back. John Adams saw it. So now we have the third chart. This whole privilege fund where a few get unearned income from exploitation and conquest of various sorts. They have now, they're going to start their war system, their colonial empire system. And now they're going to use all the industrial powers, military industrial complex, in order to channel the people's money, the taxes falling on the people's labor and wages and production. They're going to grab that use of the government to take the taxpayer dollars to wage their wars of aggression. So that now here you have a description of full-blown imperialism. So collectors of this privilege fund invest, so-called investor, just take in land and resources in the so-called undeveloped nations. And of course, if you focus the people on war and there's a bad guy out there, you got to get him, it's going to quell protests internally against the inequity, the wealth inequality, the increasing homelessness, and lack of affordable housing in your own country. So you bring the focus out to these wars. So I've recommended this before. I will again. Frank Durrell's incredibly good compilation called What I've Learned About U.S. Foreign Policy, the War Against the Third World, CIA operations, and so on. What you don't hear at school or in the mainstream media. When you view this, you view it through the land and the money lens. And you will see he's got like 12 case studies from actual documentaries from these wars. You will see the land problem, the money problem, the land problem, the money problem. The two go together. These are two keys. It's going to get us out of the right left box when we focus on this essence of these problems of war, peace, and wealth inequality. So, okay, Venezuela nationalized its oil industry in 1976, created the state-owned company,
Alanna,
What?
can I jump in?
Yeah, sure.
You're talking about land. And it isn't like the United States just to want to grab land, to have land. Isn't it all about the resources?
Okay. It's about, yes, all the resources, all the gifts of nature. Now, in classical economics, land was the term that meant all of this: the water, the air we breathe, and all the mineral and oil wealth and the surface land. Okay. Thanks for helping me clarify
no,
that.
I just needed to clarify that for myself to understand what we're talking about.
Exactly. But this is a key, and I think I went through that last session, is the corruption of economics, land, labor, capital. Henry George rediscovered the perennial truth that we have to fairly share the earth, the land. He became very well known and a powerful movement, but he was a threat. Some say Henry George was more a threat in the United States than Marx was. He was buried. So they created a whole new economics called neoliberal, which is what is taught in universities. Academic economists know almost nothing about what I've been presenting. It's been sidelined, put aside. If you don't get the fundamentals right of the relationship of the people to the planet, of the individual to the earth itself, if that's not the foundation, then you have the seeds and the roots of a very unstable and unfair society. So, Regis, what they did was they made this factor land, which is the earth itself, in classical economics. They made it a subset of capital. It's just like capital. The earth is just like a shovel. It's just a tool. It's a capital, and you can privately own it and appropriate it, and so on. All these problems. Neoclassical economics that the West has been under, starting 100 years ago or more, these big University of Chicago economists and so on, it's only labor and capital presented as always polarized, always polarized. And in a fair society with fair land rights, labor would own the full production. Labor would own the capital. Labor creates the shovels and the tools and the buildings. Okay. Is that clear enough for now?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, I call it the intellectual crime of the last century.
Yeah.
Had we followed the truth about a fair economy, Regis, we might not have had all these bloody wars.
Yeah.
All right, that's my suspicion. So,
And
okay, so now,
isn't
yeah,
that always the cause of every war? Expansionism is the need that these empires have had for land and resources. I think every
and
war that's been at the root cause of every war, all the expansion, immigration, everything.
yes, and it's external and it's an internal colonialism. For instance, what we found out about the city of Baltimore, the poorest neighborhoods, where two-thirds are renters, their rents, both their house rent and, of course, the land rent, is being extracted to the wealthier people that don't live there. It goes to the rich neighborhoods. Can you see this is internal colonialism that's increasing, always maintaining, and it's the same as external colonialism when we go outside the United States and grab. So the elite rule system, which is what we're up against. We're up against consciousness that is, as you were discussing with Eric Arnault, he calls it dualistic consciousness. I've been calling it separative consciousness. You and I talked about the Wetiko, what the native people called it, this consciousness that otherizes, that they're not us. So the elites, for the elites, the common people are not them. They're the
Yeah.
other. They're not, so they can do what they want. They can manipulate and control. We are the many. They are the few. But the many, blood got to boil enough so they figure it out. And if we don't figure it out, it's going to be another bloody war, civil war, World War III. That's why we're all feeling this anxiety. That's why I wrote about Alexander Dugin recently, my Substack. He was saying always he was optimistic there was going to be able to way to find peace. Putin and Trump were going to talk, and he's done an about face. He says the only thing we can do is fight back militarily. So, so let me finish these few slides in Venezuela. I think they'll be illustrative. And where we want to go very soon in our discussions, Regis, we've agreed to this. We want to go into movement building, really building the big, we're the trim tab, which is that little rudder on the big rudder that turns the big ship. All right. And it all starts with ideas, values, and vision. So as we get clear in the next session, I hope you invite me back. The next session, we want to look at specific policies of earth rights, of claiming the earth. We want to look at those from all levels of land and resources, and we're going to use specific examples that have been implemented. None of this is just visionary. We already have the templates for implementation.
So
Yeah,
let me make a comment. You said something to me which is so important. It's movement building. And we've seen that attempted many times, bottom up movement building. The most recent, close to being very successful, was the Occupy movement, when President Barack Obama, over one weekend, exerted force all over the country and closed all of it down. I was involved in Portland, Maine at the time. And what I'd like to say to our viewers tonight, your focus and goal has been on building a movement for all of the years you've been involved in this. I have been approaching it from a different point of view. All of my video work, my documentaries, my more than 750 videos and podcasts have, yes, they've been about informing people and educating people about some very important things like we're talking about tonight. But that's not my goal. My goal is to try to get people to mobilize, to do something. In other words, to become involved in some kind of a movement. I think that's the challenge. There's a lot of information out there, but a lot of these people who are doing the educating and the blogging and the alt media, they do not have the goal of creating a movement. In fact, it's just the opposite. It seems to be polarizing people even more, overwhelming people. And so I agree with you. That's the challenge. The challenge is not just to educate, but to mobilize people. So pardon the interruption,
Beautiful.
but I
Now, this movement that I work with, it is a movement. It's a movement within the United States, within pretty much every state within the United States, and it's in many, many, many countries. I have Zoom calls once a month with people from all continents who are on board with what we must do. So the challenge is yet making this small little movement, this little trim tab blossom and bloom. And it's only going to happen if there's clarity about a way outside of the right left box. In other words, it balances individual freedoms with social justice, social, fundamental social fairness. So the left and right has gone, oh, free market and oh, communism and back and forth, state socialism or no, individual free market. So, how do we have a truly free and fair market? We probably never had a fair market system. What's that even look like? How do we maximize individual freedoms? Through having absolutely equal and fair birthright to the basis of all opportunity, which is our Mother Earth. So I believe as we go along, we're going to go, wow, we have a movement here. We can build it. This is why we're going to go into, after these few slides on Venezuela, uh, I'll then go into the story of Henry George, the political economist that was undermined and sidelined in the United States, and Leo Tolstoy and their relationship, because it's an amazing story. Okay, so like a lot of African countries, Venezuela nationalized its oil. It said the oil is for our people, it's our oil. And they ended this foreign ownership. And then Chavez took a majority control of the large oil projects, and Western energy companies, well, we're not going to play in that sandbox. There's not enough money in it for us. So ExxonMobil, ConocoPhillips, they just left. They refused the terms that was offered by Chavez. They wanted it all.
oh
For
yeah.
profit, it's our oil. So Trump demands the oil back from Venezuela. This is just what's really blatant. I mean, he's not using just war theory. He's not using responsibility to protect. He's saying, yeah, it's a bad dictator. But, Trump is so blatant on this, which is so good because it's being just showed up into our face. It can't be any more blatant. He said that the United States is seeking to reclaim oil, land, and other assets from Venezuela, arguing that previous administrations allowed Caracas to strip Washington of its economic interests in the country. They took our oil rights. We had a lot of oil there. They threw our companies out and we want it back. A blatant imperialism. How
So
did our
it's
oil?
so it's couldn't be any more in your face.
It couldn't be.
Like there's no more freedom, democracy. There's no more human rights. It's not even about drug trafficking anymore. It's in your
Yeah.
face. It's ours, and we want it back. Look at that mug. Oh my God.
But this is how long? 500 years. I mean, the West, the colonizers declared that the native people were not fully human, and it was terra nullius. It was vacant land, and then they came and put their European flags in it. So that's why they crack in the Liberty Bell. We never had a fair land rights ethic. We never had in our democracy an underpinning for economic democracy. Thus, the flaw. Thus, we can't depend on going back to our democracy. We never had a functional democracy.
Yeah,
How
I
did our oil
agree.
get? Oh, good.
I love
ExxonMobil, yeah.
I love that title. How did our oil get under their land? Oh my
That
God.
is the question. That is the question. Okay, so now these companies are suing Venezuela billions of dollars because Venezuela decided the oil belongs to their people, and some court awarded these funds to them. And Chevron remained in Venezuela. They accepted a little bit of a reduced profits deal. So, on what basis can oil, land, and other natural resources be owned? By discovery, by purchase, by prior claim, by length of occupancy, by military might, by law, by the country flag, by corporate contracts. These are all ways that land is claimed or owned. But is any one of them fundamentally most legitimate right to own the land? So ultimately, the only rational, supportable, moral, just, and ethical basis is by birthright to the gifts of nature. and that cannot be an exclusive claim, but includes all human beings having an equal claim. Now, in your great discussion with your friend Eric Arnau, which I just listened to, you're talking about looking at these different things and how how is actually your conversation with him was looking at truth. What is being truth? What is truth? And then what is evil? Evil meaning off the mark. The mark that evil comes from the target. Uh, when you have a bullseye and you shoot your arrow, but it misses the bullseye, the center, it goes off center. Well, the center is truth. It's the guideline. It's the pathway. It's the going with the flow of the unfolding of evolution, or you might say of the divine plan. So when we're not on that target of truth, we're off it, and then we get in deep trouble. So this natural right of to our planet as a birthright is natural law.
You know,
It's
one
indigenous. It's perennial. Yeah.
one of the, I've said before, language is extremely important. And as George Orwell pointed out in 1984, how they changed, like war is peace, for example. And what you're using here is another term, or a couple of terms that I think are critical, that we have to keep coming back to and pound into people's heads. It's a birthright to the gifts of nature. This goes back to the indigenous people.
Yes.
This is exactly, and I've talked about this many times, especially with my good friend Dean Henderson, who is very close to the Lakota Sioux. He's living up in North Dakota. Language is critical, and we've got to get back to it. And so that's why I'm so interested in what we've been doing and where we're going with this, because when you talk about the root causes of where we are today, we've got to get back to some of the basics, and language is so important.
Oh, yes. So there's like a spiral, we grow, evolve with sort of a spiral. And so
I love that. By the way, I love that metaphor of yours of the target. Truth being the bullseye, and anything off the target is the wrong way.
That's evil.
Yeah, well, I think what's happening.
And when you turn it around, the word itself, it means live.
Live. Anyway, I like the metaphor.
Live and let live.
I like the metaphor.
Yeah, golden rule: live and let live. So now the quest is, we can understand indigenous culture. It was very basic, very well earth-based, but now we're in a very complicated turn of the cycle. And people say, well, land isn't even important anymore. Bull, you dig down underneath your feet and you're going to find the land. So it's how we then establish this birthright ethic in our type of societies with these complications of development. Make sense? Okay. So again, I just had to show this one twice. There are two ways to conquer and enslave a nation, one by sword, the other by debt, land and money. I'm not going to go through all these little details here. People could stop and read it, but Venezuela is about $150 billion in debt. Well, what's the United States? Over $1 trillion in debt. So, okay, they're in debt, and there's all these reasons, all these problems they've had with even really going forward with the socialism that was providing literacy and housing for people. And now they're trapped in this debt system, this odious debt. Billions in distressed debt. Who is in line to collect? Years of sanctions. Yeah, the empire, including a prohibition on trading Venezuela's debt, have made it hard to keep tabs on ownership. The largest share of commercial creditors likely consists of international bondholders. What's that? That's the banksters. That's the international financial institutions, the World Bank, the IMF. Okay, including specialist distressed debt investors. Now I'm going to make money off the fact that you're suffering from your debt burden. And these are sometimes called vulture funds. So what is the big enchilada here? This is where the land and the money comes together. The end of the petrodollar, the real reason for the Venezuelan raid. The message from Washington is clear. Your resources belong to the dollar system. All right. So people understand this petrodollar issue. It'd be good if they did some homework. So let's chat here while I pull us up to the very top of this PowerPoint because I'm already there. So thinking this is a kind of our economics of war and peace part 3. And now we are going to focus on Henry George, the great American political economist that hardly anybody ever heard about because he was written out of the history and economics sects. Okay. Henry George and Leo Tolstoy. Never talked on the phone, no internet. Somehow they got to know enough about each other that they became heart, mind, and spirit close friends. Okay, this is a historical marker in front of Henry George's birthplace in Philadelphia, born 1839. His book, Progress and Poverty, sold in the millions. The only book that sold better than Progress and Poverty at those times was the Bible.
The Bible, yeah.
The Bible. He was Henry George was as well known as Mark Twain. There were Henry George cigars, Henry George's images on barns. I mean, he was a populist movement figure. And he tax. Okay, so here's the key that we need to roll out what this means. Tax socially produced land values. Society, nature and society creates the value of land. Just take now a minute the surface land in a city, the infrastructure, the libraries, the schools, the population growth and exchange increases the land value. It's not created by any individual. It's just socially created, but it's now privatized. We need to socialize the land rent, surface, and oil minerals so that there's no private profiteering in the gifts of nature. That's what it's all about. And this is a rediscovery of a basic policy and principle. The physiocrats in France before the French Revolution was urging the King Louis XIV to do this. Henry George rediscovered it because he was seeing great riches and poverty in the United States. He saw it really horrific when he went to India. And this became his great quest. What's causing, as development proceeds, as he saw when he's living in San Francisco, it was a simple village, fairer distribution of wealth. And then it starts growing and growing, and then this rich poor gap starts happening. So he's asking, and the outcome is his magnificently important work, Progress and Poverty. So, in a nutshell, collect the commons rent, the value of the nature and society created land and resources. Collect that for public expenditure. Instead of taxing the individually produced labor and tools, capital, your shovel, your equipment. Now, that's what you were ranting about in the beginning of this, Regis, when you talked about they tax this and tax that. You said maybe they tax food. Some places in the United States, some states do tax food. So you're right. They're taxing everything, very little tax upon the commons rent. There's a little bit. We need to increase that little bit while we take off these other taxes. So he ran for mayor of New York. It looked like the first time corrupt Tammany Hall. They were throwing his votes in the rivers there in New York. And then he was told he shouldn't try to run again. His health was deteriorating. He threw his life into this work. He ran for mayor the second time, but then died of a stroke 2 weeks out. So that's Henry George in a nutshell. He became well known throughout other countries in the world and did lecture tours to Ireland and Australia and so on. Now, here's Tolstoy, the great Russian novelist, deep moral philosopher, member of the aristocracy as a Count Tolstoy, who was aggrieved by the poverty of the peasants. So he also sets about a quest to understand and what to do about the poverty of the peasants, because he's a caring, moral, open-hearted man, as was Henry George. So there's that affinity right there. He says, if you feel pain, you're alive. If you feel other people's pain, you're a human being. Written in answer to a German occupied in spreading the ideas and system of Henry George in his own country, who wrote to ask Tolstoy what views he held concerning such an activity. So Tolstoy says, I've been acquainted with Henry George since the appearance of his social problems. That was uh, uh, before Tolstoy came across The Progress in Poverty. He said, I read that book and was struck by the correctness of his main idea and by the unique clearness and power of his argument, which is unlike anything in scientific literature, and especially by the Christian spirit which pervades the book, making it also stand alone in the literature of science. After reading it, I turned to his previous work, Progress in Poverty, and with a heightened appreciation of its author's activity. Now, Tolstoy was rich and he became famous from writing War and Peace and Anna Karenina. And he saw this superficial religiosity, Christianity of the upper classes. And they're spouting Christianity and the peasants are starving. And this really aggrieved him. And he went into a period of depression, Tolstoy did, until he came across, in large part, what is the true Christian ethic, thou shalt not kill, love thy brothers, that got distorted and thrown out, frankly, under the Roman Empire in the Councils of Nicaea 425. That's another whole story, the corruption of Christianity. So he was able to regain his faith in a way in humanity and in truth and in the validation of the true Christian spirit. But he certainly was against, as was Henry George, institutionalized Christianity. So people do not argue with the teaching of Henry George. They simply do not know it. By 1905, George had died and his movement was repressed. Think Occupy movement. Yeah, the state forces come in and just throw you out. In Henry George, Proposed Reform Explained, Tolstoy wrote, personally, I regard Henry George's scheme as the most just, beneficent, beneficent, and above all, practicable of all the schemes I am acquainted with. And he was a great intellectual. He knew Marx. He knew all the schemes, all the ideas. Tolstoy was a great admirer and proponent of the economic theories of Henry George, who advocated for a single tax on land value, which is the land and resource value, which is estimated, Regis, to be 1/3 of GDP. It's no small amount. Tolstoy argued that land, like air or water, is an indispensable condition for life and should be the general and equal possession of all humanity, not individuals. When the land question is solved, laborers will have access to the land, not be forced into exploitative conditions in factories or as servants. The system of private land ownership was established by violence and has no true moral justification. Let me clarify what this means, because this is a little bit, we're not opposed to private land use. Ownership is a really tricky word. It actually comes back from the word ownership. You owed something. Just like most people with a mortgage today, you don't really own your house, you're still owing on it. So the system of private land ownership. So we're called, more accurately, it would be to say the system of private profit in land. So your title, your property title becomes a authorization that you have the right to use that land as an individual, which means if I want to plant a garden in my backyard, those vegetables are mine. I put my labor on my land. If somebody wants to come along and grab out my vegetables, that's theft. But again, distinguishing the products of nature from nature itself, if somebody wants to come along and buy or take, like Bill Gates has now acquired more farm agricultural land in the United States than anybody else. So, because he had the money to buy it. So, what right does he have to profiteer in the gifts of nature just because he could buy it? So we're saying that private land title is conditional, real quickly, on two things: that we pay to the community the land rent, which is created by nature and society, that belongs to society, and we do that in property taxes anyhow, but the property tax is upside down. We'll talk about that another time. So we're going to say this: you have private use rights if you pay your land rent, and if you don't destroy your land and treat it in such a manner that it hurts your neighbor's land. In other words, you're not going to build a little factory in your backyard and pollute the air that's going to go all through the neighborhood. So there are environmental, if you will, use rights, and then economic use rights. You fulfill those, then the state will protect your private property rights. But it's conditional private property. It's not just it's mine. Like Trump is saying, the oil is ours. No, he's saying essentially because of his mindset, the oil is mine because I'm the emperor now. What I say goes. So land is a common resource. The earth cannot be anyone's private property, belongs to everyone. We've gone through that. Abolition of land ownership. The supposed right to property and land is the foundation. This is Tolstoy. It's the foundation of economic misery and political disorder. Its abolition was as necessary as the abolition of slavery 50 years ago. Well, we would say that. We have to abolish private profit in the earth, just as we had to abolish slavery. Single tax, Tolstoy explained Georgia's system where those who use better land would pay a rent tax to the community, while those who use no land, they don't pay anything. More land and the best land, those guys are going to pay more. This revenue would be used for communal needs, thus ensuring equal access and benefit from the land's value. The moral and social benefits. Implementing this reform would eliminate the sin of profiteering from the labor of others and remove a major cause of dissension and exasperation between the working and non-working classes. This is what Marx wants to do. This is what the Marxists, labor, the proletariat, and all of that. But you know what? Somehow the Marxists have neglected what Marx wrote about in Das Kapital Part 3, which is all about the land question. And the very first point of the Communist Manifesto is to nationalize the land. Somehow they don't talk about land. They just talk about labor. And when they talk, when Marxists that I know talk about labor, they're still talking about factory workers. I say to them, but I think my dentist, is he included as a labor? He's working all day cleaning the teeth. You know what I mean? Professional work that's contributing to society, that's also labor. Why do you think you have to have a blue collar? You have a white collar. Your white collar, you may mean a professional that's giving goods and services, or your white collar means that you're living by the theft of this unearned income. You got to go see what causes the creation of wealth and how it's distributed. So this is a portion of a letter Tolstoy wrote to a Russian peasant living in Siberia. And this term, desyatin, is about 2.7 acres. So Tolstoy is caught telling the peasant, according to this scheme, Henry George's, it would follow that a landowner who is at present in possession of 2,000 desyatins would continue to own them, but would have to pay for them in the treasurer here in Tula, where he lived, where Tolstoy lived, between 12 and 15,000 rubles a year. Because hereabouts the best land for agriculture and building purposes would be included. And as no large landowner would be able to bear the strain of such a payment, he would be obliged to give up the land. So you put sufficient fair burden on large landowners, and they're probably going to get, and I can talk about instances where this has happened. They start letting go of their land. And what you have now, you have land reform. But land reform is the left term. How about coming from the right and call it private property for all? If you want everybody to have their little piece of private property, how do you make that happen? Because we don't have it. So again, you talk about words and language, Regis, and we can craft our words in such a way that we can show this vision of a way forward out of right and left. Oh, so to go on with his letter, whereas our Tula peasant would have to pay about 2 rubles less for each desyatin of the same ground than he does at present. In other words, the smallholder's paying less now. Would always have available land around him, which he could then hire for 5 or 6 rubles. And in addition, would not only have no other taxes to pay, but would get untaxed all Russian and foreign articles which he needs. Well, here's your free trade. And Henry George's book, Protection of Free Trade, went into the trade issue. Free trade, if I grow carrots and you grow corn, if we want to trade carrots and corn over the backyard fence, we should be allowed to do that. That's free trade. But if you have 50, 100 acres of land and I have 5 acres, it's never going to be fair trade. So to have fair trade, we must address the land problem. When we address the land problem, then we can talk about a fair and free market. Fairness from the left, the emphasis on freedom from the right. They're not separated. Fairness and freedom. We need both. So in towns, the owners of houses and manufactories can continue to possess their property, but will have to pay into the common treasury for the land they occupy according to its valuation. Tolstoy not only had the basics, he had the technicalities down right. And our movement has been moving forward on very, very precise technicalities using now land value mapping. Who owns what land where? How much is it worth? How much should they be paying into the common funds? What we find, again, using our city of Baltimore example, is that the assessment of the land value is too low and the assessment on the buildings is high. We got to reverse that. We're seeing that the poorer people are paying unfair amount in property taxes. The homeowners with well-kept buildings are paying way more in property tax than a vacant lot sitting beside them that's paying almost nothing. So that's when we get in those technicalities down the road. So I love this. Tolstoy says, I sit on a man's back, choking him and making him carry me, yet assure myself and others that I am sorry for him, and I wish to lighten his load by all means possible, except by getting off his back. You like that, Regis?
Yeah, I love it.
So Leo Tolstoy wrote, this is a startling thing. I still reflect on this statement. Solving the land question means the solving of all social questions. That's something to deep dive into. He didn't mean it's a solving of all emotional, psychological, spiritual questions. He meant the fundamental social problems we have today. And that, if you do get into Henry George's social problems, you'll see he's going through many of them. Tolstoy got it. But it's something to reflect on. If you get to the root of these problems, you get to the fundamentals, a lot of these issues that we keep, looks like so many separate issues, they're not. They have a root. Tolstoy believed that introducing this idea could transform the Russian Revolution, which was already underway, into a great act of righteousness. However, his appeal was met with an unwelcome reception, and Tsar Nicholas II did not implement the proposed reforms. Tolstoy consistently promoted George's ideas throughout his later life, corresponding with George himself and incorporating George's philosophy into his fiction, such as his last novel, Resurrection. We're going to go into that. So Tolstoy wrote a letter to Tsar Nicholas II, 1902. Excuse me. Oops, what happened? Urging him to implement Henry George's land reform ideas, a solution to Russia's social and economic problems. Tolstoy considered George's single tax system the most practical and moral approach to abolishing the land private property problem, which he viewed as a form of slavery. Summary of the letter's content. In his letter, Tolstoy addressed Nicholas II as dear brother and emphasized the dire situation in Russia. He argued that the existing political and economic despotism, founded on the private ownership of land, was the root cause of the people's suffering and the brewing revolution. Tolstoy advocated for the following key points based on Henry George. Let's see. Okay, I just want to interject at this point, though. Tsar Nicholas, of course, did not implement this reform. The Russian Revolution became very violent, and many of us know the Marx, the Lenin, the story there about the attempt to have a fair society through repressing the market forces, the individual entrepreneurial activities, and creating a very highly centralized economy. So while basic needs, I was in Russia for a bit of time, basic needs were met for the people, but at the cost of a lot of individual freedoms and ultimately of the capacity to increase production because of the limitations on individual freedoms. So really, the experiment of the Soviet time uh, in the attempt to create a fair economy, and of the West in the harping on the private-based property economy. Again, we need both the freedom and the fairness. So
So,
let's see.
Alanna, um,
Yeah.
we're up against an hour and a few minutes now. Um, how can we pick this up again the next time? Probably in a week or so. Uh, what do you propose you do next?
Um, I'd like to go through how you implement the commons rights to earth policy on the local level through surface land value tax, on regional levels through using example the Alaska Permanent Fund, where you socialize the oil profits and so on. I can go into that, and how you have a decentralized system of fair land rights through tax change. But then it builds up to a regional or bioregional governance. And then it builds to a minimal type of global governance. So I want to explore examples of how this policy works with different domains, different resource rent domains, and then how also it can build the basis of a decentralized yet coherent political economics. And that's where I'd like to take it next, along with movement building around this. And I just have a few more slides. If you can give a few more minutes, and then we'll be ending this. Okay. So, okay. So here I mentioned Resurrection, the Tolstoy's last novel, where he actually has uh, the person talking to the peasants who he's about to give his land to. The Baron is going to give land to the peasants. Now he's asking the peasants, how do you think it's going to, how are you going to fairly share it? So this emboldened the Koyakov. He began to explain Henry George's single tax system. The earth is no man's, it is God's, he began. Just so, that it is. Now, these are the peasants responding. Just imagine, you even just close your eyes, listeners, and pretend you're at a play of the Resurrection book. So the land is common to all have the same right to it, but there's good land and bad land, and everyone would like to take the good land. How is one to do in order to get it justly divided? He's asking his peasants. In this way, he that will use the good land must pay those who have got no land the value of the land he uses. So, Henry George. The Koidov went on answering his own question. As it would be difficult to say who would pay whom, and money is needed for communal use, it should be arranged that he who uses the good land should pay the amount of the value of his land to the commune for its needs. Commune, community, same thing. Then everyone would share equally. If you want to use land, pay for it. More for the good, less for the bad land. If you don't wish to use land, don't pay anything. And those who use the land will pay the taxes and the communal community expenses for you. Now, there's a peasant responding. Well, he had a head, this George, said the oven builder, moving his brows. He who has good land must pay more, if only the payment is according to our strength, said the tall man with a bass voice, evidently foreseeing how the matter would end. The payment should not be too high nor too low. If it's too high, it will not get paid, and there will be a loss. If it's too low, it will be bought and sold. There should be a trading in land. This is what I wish to arrange among you here. That is just. That is right. Yes, that would do, said the peasants. He has had this Henry George. See what he has invented. All right. So this is Henry George Jr. Henry George had died by now, and Henry George Jr. is paying a personal visit to Yasna Polovaya. That I can't call the name of Tolstoy's place. So for more on Henry George and Tolstoy, see, I got some websites for people to connect with, YouTube, and there. Now I had Regis's thoughts, and then I wanted to go to one lasting soft power idea for us. Okay, so Regis,
Go straight ahead to your soft power idea.
Okay, okay. So this is the fourth of the four graphs. It's transforming this privilege fund it's a new form of governance. I call it Earth rights democracy that collects the commons rent for the people equitably. And you will see in this chart, there are no guns. There's no land and money problem. So my idea, soft power for Putin. And let's look at the beautiful girl first. Anastasia is a young girl in her glade. I co-generated this image with easy peasy AI. And sometime we really should bring out this amazing, amazing woman named Anastasia, and the movement she's building actually for Russia. So Putin write, oh, for Putin to write a letter. This I wrote a couple weeks ago. It doesn't even sound remotely possible now, Regis, okay, given the brink we're on. But my idea at the time was for Putin to write a letter to Trump where he mentions the growing homelessness and lack of affordable housing in the United States, as well as the growing land speculation in Russia, which you brought up about Yalta, where you live, Regis. Putin tells Trump about the enormous respect that the great Russian novelist Leo Tolstoy had for the American political economist Henry George, thus putting focus on our Henry George land rights movement in the United States and focus on our big social problems here. So Putin suggests to Trump that they work together. Almost embarrassed. I mean, it's so far apart. That they work together to implement the land and tax policy reforms advocated by Henry George in order to improve the living conditions for their respective nations, that they work to make America and Russia great again. That's my visionary, idealistic thought, Regis. But the way forward is. And do you know Scott Ritter? Are you in communication with Scott Ritter? He's also got his Friends of Russia and America going, and you've got your Friends of Russia, Crimea, America going.
Yeah, no, I'm familiar. I'm familiar with Scott. He used to come on my show almost every week until he
Wow.
until he got to be a rock star. And
Well, let's get to this rock star now and get him back on your show with the idea, which I posted on his Substack, and I've gotten a lot of likes for it. Is I remember when we were kids and we would have pen pals with people in different countries, and now we have the internet and all this. Let's compile a whole bunch of American people, a whole bunch of Russian people, and get them talking, get them, to become personal friends with each other, tell their life stories. Get 100 or 200 Russians and Americans on the Zoom call together, go into breakout groups of 5 or 10 people talking. Let's use all this information and technology to now support the rising up of the superpower of the world. No, it's not United States, Russia, China, none of the BRICS. It is we, the people of the planet. We, the people of the planet, incredible power for the well-being of us all and our children and our children's children. Let's relate. Let's communicate.